this thing with the new capabilities? Well, what we now want to do is, upon opening the file dialog, we may now end up doing something like this. So I want IBM month, I want IBM week. Okay, you select that one also. Further down, you may want to do AAPL month, because maybe you want to be able to compare the IBM month with the Apple month. You want to see, are they moving, tracking together, whatever. You want to look at multiple stocks. Well, now what you want to do is to, because you don't have enough room here, you want to create for each stock a new form that would display each one of your choices. So this one might be the IBM month. By the way, there is, I believe, a title property for your chart and whatever. So if I pick 10 stocks, I want to display 10 things. Now, here's what's going to happen. We will no longer be using the data grid view. So, in this, all that we will have is essentially this. A chart that would display our stock, okay, and the volume. Okay, that's what we want to displace. Okay, we use the data grid view in project one because it was pretty easy to bind to it, to display, and there weren't all these things that you had to set up in the chart. Remember the chart when we went and we said everything, how many y coordinates and what order to give and so forth? I wanted to make sure that you knew how to do that to display the chart. But for the data grid view, all you had to do was really say, hey, I'm going to just write information about a bunch of candlesticks, and it did the rest. It actually did the header, and once you bound to it, it just displayed the data. It was like, oh wow, I don't have to do much. That's why if you went to ChatGPT and you let it give you all that code that actually adds every cell, you know, I had told you, I'm not gonna make you do something that's complicated. You know, it's probably gonna be a couple of lines of code. So if it did that and gave you 20 lines, the old-fashioned way, that's where you should have had some doubts, and maybe you said, maybe I need to go talk to Dr. Galti, because that makes sense, okay? So, and this is also where I said use data binding. In that case, you could ask ChatGPT, please use data binding. By the way, has anybody thought of just taking all the specification and just like putting them in ChatGPT? Anybody? That'd be okay. Utah, did you get anything from that?
No, it just created a mess.
Oh, thank you, I like that. Created a mess. Actually, I think maybe if you reorganize things, you probably could get it to do the whole thing. Which, by the way, is what they do now with lots of things, you know. So, try it out. Just make sure you know what it's giving you. Okay, so we want to do that, have a chart, but we want to have a couple more things. A button, you know, I mean, everybody's going to look the same because I find that people tend to, well, not everybody, but most people have exactly what I put on the board. That's how they do their project. Whatever happened to the eraser? Does somebody see it? Did I put it down somewhere? Somebody's desk. Aha, thank you, it was hiding, okay. All right, so, you know, put a refresh button in the middle, and over here a date time picker for the start, another one for the end. Okay, that doesn't use too much room, and you can have your entire chart use the top, and the way you would do that is, how many of you use docking for the chart? Only one. Okay, in the doc property, you will see that when you go to the doc property and you click to specify what you want, you get a little drawing that will say, okay, you what the window would look like and said, do you want to dock it here? Do you want to dock it here? Do you want to dock it in the bottom? Do you want to dock it on the side? Do you want to dock it here? You click on the top docking, and what it will do, it will dock this thing and attach it to your top, so that if you stretch your window, the whole thing stretched, this guy stays attached to your top. If you stretch it horizontally, it stretches horizontally, okay? That way you can open your window and decide, oh, I want more room. So remember to use docking. Okay, so this is what we want to display for every file that you've chosen. So what you're going to be doing, and this is important, is you're going to add to your project a new form. Okay? Remember, when you started the project, you started with one form. What was that form originally called? Form 1, okay? And that's what Visual Studio, well, the Windows Form framework gave you. It said, you know, in our framework, things start with a form. So we're gonna give you that very first form, which is gonna be your input form. Make sense? Okay. That doesn't mean that that's the only form you can have. You can create a whole bunch of other forms and bring them in and out as you need. Imagine if your application had a main form because you're creating an application for a tax preparer. Now the tax preparer will say, okay, I'm going to have a main form. When that comes up, I'm going to put the basic information about my client, their name, their social security number or their tax ID number, and a couple of other things, okay? But once you've gotten that, maybe for that client, you need to fill out 10 different forms. A W-2 form, they've done some contract work, so a W-9 form, you know, and a few other forms. So what you want to do as a tax preparer, you want to start your application. The first form that comes is name, social security number, you know, the basic stuff. And then you're going to say, okay, now I got to go prepare their W-2 form. So you might want to click on W-2, and a W-2 form should come up that you fill out. When you're done with that, like maybe you say close and save, whatever, you want to say, okay, now W-9 form, and so forth. And you may have 20 different forms, and you may need to, you know, fill out different type of forms based on what your client does. Well, here's kind of the same thing. You're going to have a main form. Now, what is that main form going to look like, given that we've decided that we're going to display our charts on separate forms? Well, that now means that our main form doesn't have to be complicated anymore. When the system comes up, here's what you'll want to have. This is now to be your new main form. It's just going to be a form like this, with maybe a start, frame, and those would be your dates. Maybe a load button, okay? And that's it. How many of you can see that? Oh yeah, that's all I would need. Now, there would be one more thing in here that we didn't show. It's the open file dialog. How many of you can already see why your main form, the one that comes up when you start the program, would be that simple now? Instead of being as, well, I wouldn't say complicated, but as complicated as your Project 1 original form, which we have there. Go ahead.
So you don't need to have all the chart info because you haven't even loaded it. So once you load it into the main form, then it just gets a bunch of copies of all the different types of data.
Yeah.
You know?
Could have been said a bit more clearly, but yes. Okay, I'm still trying to build up your communication skills, and you'll see why later. Yeah, you don't need all of this anymore because in your main form, when you think about it, are you going to need the data grid view anymore? So that's gonna go away. Are you going to be displaying the chart on the main form? Now, that goes away. So what's left? I mean, I've just taken away two things. What's left? The load, the start and date. And you'll need the open file dialog. You won't have the binding source anymore because you don't have to bind to anything. So when you really think about it, you say, hey, what's left out there is pretty much what's left when you remove the data grid view and the chart. And of course, when you remove this dye, this tends to go away.